Hi everybody, this is the Cricket Badger radio show podcast.
Each badger marks the track with its own scent.
His black legs are short but very powerful for digging. In fact, the name badger probably comes from the French word bêcher, meaning digger.
It's that badger style.
On this edition of the Cricket Badger radio show podcast, we'll be catching up with an old mate of mine from Yorkshire days, Kevin Sharp, former coach at Yorkshire, former Yorkshire batsman, but now the head coach at Worcestershire. We'll be catching up with Mr. Kevin, finding out what his hopes and fears are for the season and beyond. Also catching up with his thoughts on Joe Root, Moeen Ali, etc. after this winter with England. And we'll be throwing the Cricket Badger quick questions at former England batsman Nick Compton. So stay tuned, plenty of action as we go through the Cricket Badger radio show podcast.
It's that badger style.
Kevin Sharp, welcome to the Cricket Badger radio show podcast. Good news for you in recent times. Appointed the head coach at Worcester. Very many congratulations.
Thank you, James. It's a great honour and a privilege to be offered this position. It's been well documented that, the club have had a difficult time over the last few weeks. And, we're looking to achieve that stability now, and to be offered this position, having been here 4 years and built some, I think trusting and good relationships with people at the club is very special for me.
I obviously spent quite a bit of time with you when you were working at Yorkshire as the batting coach there. Your time there finished, and you've had quite a circuitous route back into county cricket, and then to get this top job at a county, it's been a bit of an interesting ride, isn't it?
Well, it's a funny old world we live in, isn't it? I left Yorkshire, I believe it was 6 years ago now. And that was a difficult time. The club went through a restructure, and I finished leaving the club. And, the following year or two were really, quite challenging, particularly initially where, I really missed working with some very good players. And, I was very fortunate to go into business with a partner, having done some NLP training, and that was really quite an adventure and very fulfilling. However, deep down, I always missed working at the highest level of cricket, and when Steve Rhodes gave me the opportunity 4 years ago to come to Worcester, initially to work on a part-time basis, I took that with both hands, and it's developed now over 4 years into this situation. And, no one could have ever envisaged that. I didn't even envisage this 2 weeks ago. But here we are, and, excited and ready to go.
It's a different job for you. I mean, you've had a lot of experience of coaching batsmen, as you say. Some of the very best players in the world you've had your input to, but actually taking the helm at a county, it's a different challenge.
Different challenge, yeah, different responsibilities. What I have had though is having, coached and managed the second 11 at Yorkshire for 3 years, and for 4 years here at Worcester, I've had a reasonable amount of team management experience and dealing with players on a day-to-day basis in that respect. So, that will stand me in good stead for what's to come next. I have to say, I've always had kind of my reservations about what the job description would be of a head coach. there's certain things that I've never dealt with, as in finance and contracts and recruitment and all those things. But having spoken, to the club about, some of my kind of, perhaps areas that I've less experience in, they've been waylaid really. We have a new chief exec coming into post shortly in Matt Rawnsley, who is a former player of Worcestershire but has been very successful in business, and he's going to support me with all those sorts of things that I've less experience of, and the club have made it very clear to me that they believe my strengths to be man management, to be communicating and connecting people together and gaining trust and respect, and they see those as my strengths, which is probably how I would put that message across myself, and so that's why they want me to do it. So for me is very heartwarming. And, you know, the first thing I asked the captain when asked to do this was, how would the players respond to this? Would they be happy with this? And he pretty much told me straight away that the lads would be 110% behind this. And that's certainly proved to be the case over the last 2 weeks.
You mentioned the man management side of things there. A mutual friend of ours, Anthony Mcgraw, was a guest on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast a few weeks ago. And when I asked him the question about who was the biggest influence in his career, you were one of the first names he mentioned there. You've got a history of not just kind of having an input in people's batting techniques, but also forging a relationship with players and being part of their cricket lives.
Well, that's good of you to say so. I mean, if I was to analyse why I coach, is because I want to support people and give them some perhaps experiences that come from a guy who's been around a while. And if that helps and that benefits someone, then I get a great deal of satisfaction from that, and that's why I do it. And you know, I only spoke to Magsy the other day, because we do keep in touch, and, you know, we've known each other a long time now, and there's a lot of trust there, and we'll continue to speak. And, I'm actually delighted when I look around the circuit now that there's another 3 guys with a Yorkshire background who are head coaches in clubs.
Yeah.
Who I know very well and keep in touch with. We've got obviously Mags now at Essex and Craig White at Hampshire, and obviously your own Andrew Gale, who's a good mate. Well, they all are.
You've got those mates at different clubs, but they're your opponents now. They're your competitors, aren't they? You want to get one over on them as well.
Well, of course, and that's what the game's all about. It still wouldn't stop us having a beer afterwards. But I can't. I'm really looking forward now. I mean, I know that we play Yorkshire at Scarborough in the 4-day game, and I really look forward to that. It's kind of, you know, I look forward to catching up with members, and I'm sure we'll have a little bit of banter. I sat in the dressing room with the members sat in the front there, and I really look forward to that sort of experience and challenge, and you know, can't wait really.
Roll back to your playing days, Kev. I mean, things have changed a little bit, haven't they, since then? But I remember interviewing you, I think it was out in Barbados on a pre-season tour, might have been Abu Dhabi, but you gave me a very good interview about the kind of psychology of batting. And I remember very clearly you said to me once, you know, the form that a batsman has is very fragile. You can go to a match and you can get a couple of ducks. It's a week till you bat again. Maybe you only get one chance at your next game. You saw off LBW early on, and form can disappear on you very quickly. As a player that's been there and done it and had that experience, are you better equipped maybe to have a chat one-to-one with a batsman and get him through that?
Well, you know, you always claw on your own experiences, and, you know, I've been very open in the past about, you know, some of my own experiences, and I would say that, you know, for me, at Yorkshire as a player, there were times when it was very difficult. I went through some quite challenging feelings and emotions, and often negative ones that affected my performance. And, you know, but in those days at Yorkshire, you know, the psychology and sort of emotional support probably wasn't, you know, a priority. and I think that, you know, the very fact that I had to manage difficult situations myself, and eventually come through those, has probably, without doubt, stood me in good stead for my coaching roles. And, you know, I am a person who really does believe that, you know, when you play cricket at the highest level, there's a lot of people who are very good at cricket, but I would say that they're probably those who make it to the highest level and are most successful are probably the ones that are mentally the strongest.
And it's a case of when you're actually, the chips are down and you're out there in the middle, you have it between the ears enough to stand up and be counted, isn't it?
Well, that's right. Look, I mean, you know, we all know that, you know what, we call it in Yorkshire, don't we call it the top 4 inch, what goes on in the brain, and it can be very complex, and you know, you can range from being confident to thinking good things, you can range from being out of form and thinking bad things, and that affect you, and you know, even though you're a professional sportsman, we're still vulnerable, and we're still human beings, and you know, we have times that when it's difficult, and you know, I think that, for me, I've recognised that, and I hope that, you know, there'll be lots of lads around who would say that perhaps Kevin has given me some support through his own experiences when they've needed it.
I suppose as a coach, it's easy to coach a player who is knocking out hundreds left, right and centre. It's a lot harder to coach a player who is struggling. Is your way of managing a player like that not just to get them in the nets and throw loads of balls at them, but to take them to one side, maybe sit down and just have a chat?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I mean, you know, there's it's like how many ways are there to try and achieve your goals? You know, it's more than one way to skin a cat, sort of thing. And you know, and I think you have to rely on your own instinct on what to say and the right things to do that might be appropriate for a player. But you know, I recall back that there were times when I felt as though I was lonely and I didn't have anyone to really communicate about some of my inner feelings. And I think nowadays, you know, players are much more open, and coaches have the skills. Most coaches have the skills now to be able to support players when they're vulnerable. And of course, you know, we know that sports psychology is also playing a big part in that as well.
It's that Badger style.
You can get in touch with the show, contact us on email, cricketbadger@hotmail.com, or you can tweet us @cricket_badger. Follow us and subscribe on YouTube. Plenty of ways to get involved with the Cricket Badger radio show. Stay tuned as we go through 2018.
It's that Badger style.
You've got one of your Worcestershire players out there with England at the moment, and he's not had the best of winters, Moeen Ali. He's a player that I've had mixed feelings with in the past. He seems to be unfortunate in that he's maybe a kind of second string county spinner that's been shoehorned into that role to get his runs at test level. But last summer he was incredible for England. This winter he struggled. Is he a player that you'll have any input into when he comes back home?
I know Moeen is a fantastic guy. The lads love him to bits at Worcester. You know, he's a flair player. He's a very skillful, talented player. And, you know, I mean, personally, I think he's done absolutely fantastically. I mean, he's, you know, when he plays for Worcester, he bats in the top order, and, you know, he is a frontline spinner. There's been all sorts of things said about him, but, you know, the way that he's managed to deal with batting lower down the order and still contributing and making match-winning innings is credit to him. And I think he's managed his sort of situation incredibly well, and credit to him.
He's got some kind of repair work to do, though, hasn't he, Kev? I mean, it's not been the best of winters for him, so he'll come back to Worcester, try and get a few county games under his belt, I'm sure, to try and get himself back into top form. Well, look,
James, I mean, I think that we all go through peaks and troughs in cricket and in life, and yes, I mean, I think England have had as a group. I mean, I know there's been some good individual performances throughout the Ashes, but you know, it's been a tough ride for all those players on the whole. And, you know, and of course the Ashes is high profile, and if you don't get it quite right and it doesn't work out right, you know, you can be on the receiving end of, you know, some harsh comments and words from people. But no, I mean, look, it's quite clear to see that Mo probably hasn't performed to his best, but, you know, he's a strong, resilient character, and, you know, he'll take that on the chin, and he'll be working very hard to come back and show us once again what he can do, and I'm sure he'll do that very shortly.
Let me take you back a few years, and there's a little blonde fella walks into your coaching office at Yorkshire, and he's gone on and he's quite recognisable now as Joe Root, the England captain, but you were one of the first guys to kind of get to grips with him as certainly in the professional kind of role as a batsman. I've heard you talk about this before, and sorry to kind of try and get you to retell the tale again, but you recognised fairly early on that he was pretty decent.
Oh, look, I mean, the first time I met Joe was quite a remarkable experience. You know, he was 12 years old. He'd been put on a scholarship by the youth coaches, recognising that, you know, this young man had some ability and skill. And, you know, as batting coach at the time at Yorkshire, I was always very keen to meet sort of lads who came on scholarship, if they were batsmen, to just introduce myself and, you know, try and ease them into the club and make them feel comfortable. And I'd arranged to meet Joe at 5 o'clock one evening after school. His dad, Matthew, brought him to Headingley. I'd been working with Anthony Mcgraw in the nets prior to Joe's meeting. Unbeknown to me, Joe and his dad were watching at the back. Mags and I were having a quite an intensive session where I was throwing the ball quite hard at him, head high and all sorts. And Joe was watching this. And when Mags left and I met Joe, we had a conversation about his batting, and it was a remarkable experience for me because it was almost like speaking to an adult. He knew at 12-year-old what he was good at, what he needed to work on. And I asked him if he would like to do some work in the nets. He said yes. And I said, what would you like to do? And he said, I want the same session Anthony Mcgraw's just had. And he said, I want you to challenge me. And I was kind of blown away by this and thinking, well, am I really speaking to a 12-year-old here? It was almost like dealing with an adult. And
as a 12-year-old, he also looked about 8 as well, didn't he? He wasn't he's never looked his age.
No, he was tiny. He was little blonde-haired, smiley face still, and he was tiny. He was small up to 15. He was small up to 15, and then he started growing, and he got out of his growth spurt, and obviously after that, he had a really challenging time between 16 and 18 when he was growing because his legs got really long and he was off balance for a while when he was batting. He got LBW a lot, but he went through kind of some tough times there, and that's probably in the end, actually, having experienced some difficult times growing up, it stood him in good stead for what's come recently for him.
And you could tell, could you, when you were going through that drill, that he had what it took?
Yeah, I mean, I did because, first of all, he wanted to face fast bowling. I could throw them as well. I'm not as good now because I'm a bit older, but he wanted to be challenged. He wanted the fast bowling. I hit him. I hit him on the body. I clipped his grill, and he smiled and nodded and said that was a good ball, wasn't it? And it was all very, very, very kind of mature, and he's always been, the way he spoke, the maturity of his knowledge and his actual skill levels were very high. I just had a gut feeling that this boy was going to be very, very special. And I told Ian Hughes that, the academy director, on the same day. And, I kind of said to Ian on that day that I believe that lad will open the batting for Yorkshire one day. And Ian said, well, that's a big statement to make for a 12-year-old. And I said, well, I can just feel it. And, of course, he's gone on and done even more than that. So, Andy keeps in touch, which is great because I do hear from him now and again. And we fulfilled our pact last summer where I did say to him when he was 14-year-old one day, you'll leave me 2 tickets on the gate at Lord's, won't you, when you're playing for England? And every year for 5 years, he texted me and said, are you coming to Lord's this year? And I turned him down for all those times because I said, I'm busy. And my wife and I, Jan, went to watch him play at Lord's last year, which ironically was his first game as England captain as well, and he made 180. And Jan and I spent the whole day with his mum and dad and his granddad and his girlfriend and baby, and it was brilliant.
When you've had such an input into a player's career, do you almost kind of get that kind of paternal feel when you see somebody do so well? Do you get that pride that you're watching them do something absolutely brilliant?
Yes, I mean, I always felt as though it was hard to replace the playing emotions, because as a player, when you made that 100 or you took that great catch or you kind of get that adrenaline rush. Well, when you finish playing, you don't quite get those adrenaline rushes that you did as a player for obvious reasons, because you're not actually doing it yourself. But I've been able to find that I get so much satisfaction from the lads doing well that you work with. It gives me so much pleasure, and to see guys going out, and if you think that you've played a small part in helping them develop, then I actually that gives me a real buzz, and that's why I like doing this job.
To take you back to something else as well, said cricket's changed an awful lot. You, I think it was told me that you started wearing a helmet in the nets when you were feeding T20 batsmen, because Johnny Bairstow, the likes of Johnny Bairstow, Gary Ballance and stuff, can hit the ball quite hard, can't they? There was one of the coaches in the Big Bash League actually got hit on the head in the nets the other day, doing exactly what you just said, but without a helmet. The ball gets hit incredibly hard now. It's quite a dangerous thing to be a coach in a batting net, isn't it?
Well, it is. I mean, when they're practicing this white ball cricket now, it's scary. I mean, I don't do so much of that flicking business anymore now because I'm not as fast and I can't do it as well. But I've been nearly hit myself a couple of times without a helmet. I wore a helmet against Johnny Bairstow indoor at Headingley. Johnny was whacking it and it kept hitting the steel rims of the nets above and coming down, and I got hit on the shoulder. So I started putting a helmet on years ago, particularly when Johnny was batting, because he did whack it so hard. But then at Worcester, I can remember flicking in the nets with a white ball practice to Brett D'Oliveira one day, and Brett just punched one back at me, and it just flew over my shoulder. And if it had been straight, it would have hit me full in the face.
Yeah.
So I started then in the nets wearing a helmet and a baseball net to also, if it came back at you, you could put your mitt in the way. But it's a real scary experience now with these lads because you're out, the bats are so good now as well. And the way they whack it is scary. So, I'm not surprised that there will be a coach gets hurt.
It was Gary Kirsten, Kev. I just found it on the internet. It was Gary Kirsten, the former Indian coach and South African batsman, got hit by Darcy Short when they were practicing for the Hobart Hurricanes in the nets. He's got a bit of a blooded lip as he got the ball hit back at him. Yeah, well, cricket balls hurt when they hit you. Especially if they're coming back at 80, 90 miles an hour. It's not the most pleasant of experiences. I guess that leads me to another question. That the challenge of a coach now isn't just when you were playing, you had the kind of smashing of one day cricket, but the championship was the be all and end all, really, wasn't it? And people looking to play Test cricket now with the one day game increasing in popularity and in numbers, T20, 50 over stuff, you got to be right across all different formats.
Yeah, it's a challenge for coaches and players, we can see, we know what's coming in England in a year or two's time with the Big Bash, and it's going to be even more profile for that type of cricket. So, it is a challenge because we have, the lads have to learn how to play all formats.
Yeah.
As a coach, it's a challenging experience to be able to get the lads to change from, the red ball thinking into the white ball. But it's what we have to do. I mean, I know that, there are certain specialists now in the world who might only just play white ball cricket, and, it's headed that way a little bit. But I'm a bit of a traditionalist, James, and I still like a lad to leave the ball now and again and defend it. So we do work. We do work on that in practice, certainly at New Road, and I'm sure that the coaches around the country are doing that as well. But, then we have to accept that, the T20 is a completely different type of game, and, and the crowds enjoy it, and it's here to stay, that's for sure.
You've got a challenge as a coach, though, haven't you? You hinted at it there, that you do have specialists. You have guys that are far more attuned to 4-day cricket. You have guys that come in and play predominantly T20. When they're not playing, though, you've got to keep them happy too, haven't you? It's kind of a bit of a balancing act.
Well, it is. I mean, look, there'll be guys who perhaps play the championship cricket who might not play the T20 format, but, what we would do at Worcester is if there's a guy who's one of our leading championship players and he's not playing T20, there's always second 11 cricket. To keep the guys ticking along. So there's plenty of cricket within the club that allows people not to, go stale or anything like that. So it has to be well thought out and well planned. It's catering for everything.
It's that Badger style.
If you've been following us on the @cricket_badger Twitter feed, you'll know that we've chosen our greatest ever Pakistan cricketer, Imran Khan, and our greatest ever England cricketer, Ian Botham. The voting now open for the greatest Australian cricketer ever. Plenty to choose from. The voting has started. Make your vote count as we find out who the greatest Australian cricketer ever is.
It's that Badger style.
Worcester's one of my favourite grounds. That ground is a lovely place to watch cricket. I imagine from what you've said, the last 4 years, it's a nice place to work as well.
Well, I've got an office that overlooks the cathedral and the cricket ground, and sometimes on a lovely morning early, when you arrive at the ground early and the sun's shining on that balcony and you overlook that, I just say thank you, because to have that at your office and every day is quite a nice experience, and as you said, it's no doubt one of the most beautiful top 6 cricket grounds in the world, and I don't know anybody who doesn't like coming to Worcester and enjoying the experience of the city and of the cricket ground and the atmosphere. There's the people of Worcester love their cricket, and I feel very, very privileged that I've been able to work there for the last 4 years. I do have an affinity. I've always had an affinity to Worcester. I mean, Duncan firmly sponsored me from being 15 years old. I was introduced to Duncan by his brother Mike, who was coaching with Doug Paget at Yorkshire at the time. I made my top score ever for England under-19s at Worcester against the West Indies, and I did quite well against Worcester as a team, as a Yorkshire player, and I kind of always loved going there. And did you know that my wife was actually born in Bromsgrove?
Oh, so she's a local.
So she was born in Bromsgrove and moved to Shropshire when she was quite young. But so my wife Jan is going to come down. We're going to live down there now. I mean, we've been commuting for 4 years, and the time's come for us to now actually move to Worcester, and for me to throw my heart and soul into this job. And we're both looking forward to that.
When you look at Worcester, I mean, it is a beautiful club, but it's not a test ground. You've had a lot of your experience at Yorkshire as well, which is a big test ground and a lot of history to it. What are the kind of differences in working for Yorkshire and working for Worcester?
Probably a bit more intimate. It's a family feel. There's less staff. Small number of staff who know each other, get on with each other. I mean, and it's just more intimate. It's just a family feel to it. It feels close-knit. I mean, it probably doesn't have some of the political issues that some of the bigger clubs may have. Smaller committees and that sort of thing. Really. So it's a different scale. I mean, I've been very fortunate to have experienced, life at a club in Yorkshire where it's got so much history and tradition of winning county championships, and you can see that with the museum and the pictures around the pavilion and all that. But of course, Worcester's got a great history as well, and there's been some very good success at Worcester. And but the atmospheres of the places are very different, and I feel very privileged that I've actually had the experience of both. Yeah,
you've got some good players there as well, haven't you? You look down at the list of your squad at Worcester. You mentioned Brett D'Oliveira as a young talent. You've got Joe Leach there. You've got Joe Clark, who I think is a terrific prospect and potential England batsman. There's a whole host of players there that can do a job for you.
We have. I mean, a lot of, and these lads you're talking about have played, they're still relatively young, and, they've played a lot of cricket now. And I think the challenge of the Premier Division next year is what they're all looking forward to. I mean, and what we do have, of course, is, which would be the envy of many counties, is we have a nucleus of young fast bowlers coming through. Which is great. We've got obviously Josh Tong, who's come to the fore of late, a young man who's been away with England Lions this winter. And we've got 2 young men in the England under-19 squad, in Dylan Pennington and Adam Finch, who are doing really well. So we have, apart from the lads who are playing regular first team cricket, we've got guys coming through who have exceptional talent. So that's very exciting, and will stand us in good stead for what's coming next.
I was watching Pennington the other day on the telly playing for England. He gets it through quite nicely, doesn't he? He's, one of the things with England over the winter has been the lack of fast bowlers, and it's been a big topic of conversation. Why do England not produce the speedsters anymore?
Oh, I'm not sure I can answer that, James. I mean, I'm not a bowling coach, but there are guys out there. I don't know that. I think that I'm not sure that statement's right. I mean, there are guys on the circuit with pace. I mean, there's one playing in the one day today, the lad Wood, who's very lively. But he's had some injury problems. Yeah, he has had some injury problems. So there are guys out there. Your own Liam Plunkett has some pace, doesn't he?
Yeah. Is it a case that, though, if you've got serious pace, maybe the county schedule isn't particularly kind to you? If you're a fast bowler, it's a hard slog, isn't it, the county circuit? There's not many days off, there's not many days to recuperate. If you are a guy that's putting your body on the line, bowling 100 miles an hour, it's quite hard to keep that up and stay injury-free.
Well, it is. But, I mean, I think the structure now, I mean, the guys are kind of monitored much better. You know, obviously England have central contracts and, you know, ECB give a lot of thought to, you know, when these guys play outside of the England team, you know, to make sure that they are well rested and well prepared. But, you know, sometimes when guys are growing up, you know, there is a lot of cricket. But I think that we're all aware of that now, and coaches are aware of that, sports science staff are aware of that, and certainly lots of counties now will definitely monitor their fast bowlers and the workload, and you know, try and stay away from these stress fractures, which you know, can be quite common at times.
One of the players that you've got that I've not mentioned yet is Ross Whiteley, who I think quite highly of. I think he's a terrific all-rounder. Those 6 sixes that he hit at Headingley last summer were one of my favourite moments of the 2017 season. I was commentating on that game. He can give that ball a clobber, can't he?
Well, he's a match winner for sure. He's a very, very dangerous player. And Ross has been away this winter. He's played in the Bangladesh T20 tournament. He's played in the T10 tournament in Dubai, and he's now going to be leaving us for the Pakistan T20 tournament in a couple of weeks' time for 4 weeks. So he's becoming high profile. You know, he's been recognised now around the world that this guy is a match winner, so he's getting the opportunity to do that. So, you know, we're delighted that he's wearing a Worcester shirt and not somebody else's, that is for sure.
When you look at your state of mind at the minute, Kev, I mean, it's not been long since you actually signed on the dotted line as head coach at Worcester, but you've said to me it wasn't something that you were necessarily expecting to happen. How much of your kind of mindset is nerves? How much of it is anticipation? How much of it is excitement? Where are you sitting at the minute?
A bit of all of it, I think, James. I think you can throw it all in a bag. But I can remember when the first morning a couple of weeks ago after I'd been offered the job and accepted it, I went in first morning and it felt very different. And the lads were laughing and smiling and calling me gaffer. And somebody called me Roy Hodgson. And so it was all a bit of fun. But I sat down and we talked, and I told them I was quite nervous. I said, I've been coming here for 4 years, and suddenly I've turned up this morning, I'm really nervous. And I think sometimes showing a bit of vulnerability like that is a good thing. I think you get respect for that.
Yeah.
But I said to them that, you know, I just said, look, guys, I mean, the main thing for me is that if you guys are totally behind this and we believe in each other, then I'm really, really up for this. And I've actually felt, you know, I'm 58 now, James. I've been in the game pretty much all the time since I left school. And, you know, I had a difficult experience at Yorkshire when I came back as batting coach, and I kind of finished up that year sort of managing the first 11. And I wasn't quite ready for that at the time. And that was going back to all those years to 2003. Didn't have the experiences behind me maybe to manage that situation as well as I could do now. And with all the experiences now, I actually thought, you know what? You're ready, mate. And the circumstances and the situation is right. And I don't feel intimidated by it. I'm excited by it. But I know I've got some wonderful young players around me and some senior players. And you know, we're putting a coaching staff together that's going to be watertight. And that, you know, that could provide something very special for us. I'd love to. I know we got promoted last year, but as a coach, never been involved in a championship winning team or as a 50 over or a T20 team. And, you know, I'd love to be able to win something before I hang my boots up.
Essex kind of set the blueprint a little bit, didn't they? They got promoted, then won the championship. I'm not saying that that's a given for you guys, but it does give you hope, doesn't it, that you can go into the Division 1 and compete?
Well, it does. And, you know, it's not always about money, how much money you've got, and how much it's about the environment and the culture. And Silvers and Mags have proved that at Essex. they would not have been expected to win that county championship, and they probably may have been, quite happy to have consolidated and been mid-table and that sort of thing. But they two special guys there. Silvers has gone on now to work with England, and they've obviously provided a wonderful platform for those Essex players to flourish. They've obviously got some wonderful players in the ranks, and they have flourished, and credit to them. And so it just goes to show that you don't have to be playing on a test ground or have the most money to be able to succeed and be successful.
And taking the job you've taken, Kev, you've obviously been at the club as well, so you know it inside out before you actually you take the helm. What are your plans for pre-season? You got a nice little run-in chance to get kind of stamp the sharp kind of seal on the team.
Yeah, well, look, we've started. We've obviously planned the winter programme. We're going away to Abu Dhabi on the 8th of March for 10 days, which the club have been there for the last 4 or 5 years, and I've enjoyed those experiences. So that will allow us to really gel together. We have It's been announced today that our second 11 coach, Matt Mason, has left the club, and so we'll now be looking for another coach to fulfil some duties. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to put that in place by Abu Dhabi. And then, we've got some pre-season practice matches. We've signed Steve McGraw from Sussex, so he's going to add some experience to the squad on the bowling department. And, we're still in the process of recruiting our overseas players. I mean, we've got to wait for this IPL auction as well coming up. I believe that's this weekend.
Yeah.
And so that, you can't always put things in place until you know which players are available. So we're in the process of that, and then hopefully within the next few weeks we'll know what the overseas situation is and how we can, areas of strengthening the squad. So, and we've also brought Alan Richardson back, who left Warwickshire at the end of last season. Alan's back as bowling coach, and he's a top guy. The guys at Worcester adore him, and he's only been with us a week, but it's like he's never been away because, of course, he was a former Worcestershire player.
It's a fantastic opportunity for you, isn't it? That, as you say, was a little bit unexpected, but a chance to really take it with both hands and to lead Worcestershire forward.
Yes. I mean, very excited, James. I mean, it wasn't expected, and I'm kind of now thinking, this is probably, an opportunity I wouldn't have expected, and I feel ready, and I kind of have a good feeling we're going to have a really good time over this next few years.
Kevin Sharp, thank you very much for being a guest this week on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast, and I wish you all the best for 2018 and beyond.
Thank you, Mr. James. It's been a pleasure.
It's that Badger style.
Exciting times ahead for Cricket Badger. We'll be going to Barbados the last 2 weeks in March, covering the Champion County game between Essex and the MCC and the 3 North East South one-day matches. Plenty of stars out there, plenty of action, and we'll be bringing it all to you on the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast, which will be daily during our Caribbean stay. If you'd like to get involved with the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast from the Caribbean, you can sponsor us, you can get involved. Contact me, cricketbadger@hotmail.com, to find out how your business can get in front of the cricket world.
It's that Badger style.
We'll throw the Cricket Badger quick questions at former England batsman Nick Compton. Nick Compton, welcome to the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast. You're the victim of the quick questions this week. We'll start with the first one. If not a cricketer, what would you have done?
I would like to have been potentially a TV presenter, a wildlife travel presenter. Gets to travel different countries. I think travel and photography and those sort of things are a real passion of mine. And any opportunity to do that, meet new cultures and try and bring different people from different walks of life together, potentially using the vehicle of sports, always something that I really enjoyed, while being a sportsman.
You've done a little bit of that, haven't you?
I've done bits of it, yeah. I've got out to places like Compton in LA, where rap music started, and believe it or not, there's a cricket team down there called the Compton cricket team, which was a very interesting experience, sort of teaching some of these homies to play cricket. And, it's just amazing how, a sport that I've sort of played or known basically since I came out of my mum's stomach has kind of reached such sort of far wide and strange places, really, places that you wouldn't have sort of associated with the quintessential English game of cricket. So I think to be there was was brilliant. It just showed what the game had done for these guys, who had potentially been in gangs and had, got on the wrong side of the track, so to speak, and what cricket had sort of brought them out of that and had taught them discipline and so many of the great qualities of the sport. So for me to go and see that sort of part of the world was fantastic. And so I've done various trips, things in India, for example, while on tour. Did some photography out there, and always an opportunity to get to other places where the game's played.
What's been the biggest influence on your career?
Oh, I mean, look, there's been a number of people. I'd have to say my grandfather, has had a huge influence. I think I came over when I was 13 years old on an English cricket tour with my prep school, and I stayed with my grandfather for a couple of weeks. And, I think it was then that it hit home, just what a sort of legend he was and the sort of respect that he had in this country. Both as an Arsenal footballer and as an English cricketer. I think just walking around Lords with him and being in that environment, I mean, for any young boy, it really whet my appetite. My eyes were as big as soccer balls back then, and I thought, this is where I really want to be. So I think, I always had the ambition to be a cricketer, but I think coming over and spending time with him and actually realizing, what he had done through the sport, but, back in the 40s and 50s and the impact he had, I think, for any aspiring cricketer was a real help and guidance. I think my dad's obviously been a massive support. Your parents, you always go back to them, but, I think that those two in particular, and then I've had a couple of really influential mentors and coaches along the way, which, without them, without the expertise, without the knowledge, without the ability to be sort of guided by them, I probably wouldn't have got here.
What's been your best moment in cricket?
Oh, I'd have to say winning that series in India. I mean, I think to my debut series, to make my debut over there in a country that sort of sees cricket as a religion was incredible. I think to hit the winning runs in Mumbai, that first Test match win will always go down as one of my probably the greatest Test victory I had. It was a fantastic series, a real iconic series. And, I think I look back at that with very, very fond memories. There's no doubt my first 100 in New Zealand will also be a very special moment. I think getting a Test 100 is something that you want to do as a batsman. So I'd say those two moments were definitely up there. And then I guess it goes without saying, but in Durban, having been recalled back into the team, I grew up in Durban. I sort of spent all my formative years at the ground. My family was there. To go out and play a sort of couple of match-winning innings to win a Test match in Durban, is definitely right up there as well.
What's been your worst moment in cricket?
Oh, no doubt being left out. I think, I had an innings at Headingley where I didn't realise at the time, but was being heavily scrutinised. And I think when I came off, I realised that, it then put me under huge pressure. I think, as I've always said, international cricket is severely living a dream when you're playing well. But when you're not playing well, it can be very uncomfortable. And there's nothing worse than being sort of feeling exposed on the highest level, on the highest platform. So I think those moments where I got dropped, where my form wasn't great and I really felt that I wasn't performing at my best is really disappointing, because there's nothing you can do to really stop that. You're in the moment, you've got to try and pull yourself through it, but for whatever reason you edge that ball and that could be the end of the opportunity. So those are always very trying moments, and I think missing the Ashes in 2013 by a week when they decided to go with Joe Root to open the batting, I think was probably my biggest disappointment. I thought I was playing the best cricket of my career then, and I felt playing against Australia would have played into my strengths as a batsman, and I think that was probably the biggest disappointment I ever had.
If you could trade lives with any current cricketer for a day, who would you choose?
It's a very good question. I'd probably trade lives with I'd say A.B. de Villiers, to be honest with you. I think the way that he plays the game, 360 degrees. I think he plays all formats. He's an entertainer. He's got a huge reputation in India. Some of the shots he's played, some of the innings he plays, I think are just breathtaking. And to play with that kind of freedom and enjoyment, I think is something I'd love to experience. Having, really put my focus into Test cricket. So, it would be nice to be A.B. de Villiers for a time, particularly in the white ball form of the game.
Nick Compton, I'm going to put you in charge of world cricket for a day. What one rule or change would you bring in?
I get rid of DRS, and I'm just not a big fan of it. I don't think it's foolproof. I think there's still a lot of mistakes being made. I think, it's been it's supposed to get rid of the howler, but I think in some ways it's sort of created a couple of howlers. I just feel that umpires are very much a part of the game. I think that there are innovations that can help the umpires, but I think that, let's try and, still keep the sort of traditions of the game, try and get players to be, more, what's the word I'm looking for, sort of, honest and what have you, moving forward. I just don't like DRS. It's become too technical, and I just feel that it doesn't always work, and therefore, and I also think that it changes the rules of cricket. I think benefit of the doubt has been something that has always been a part of the game. I think to take that away now, suddenly puts stats and everything into real question.
It's one of the features of cricket down the years is that you maybe get away with a few and capitalise one day, and then you maybe get sawn off another. It's kind of the swings and arrows of cricket, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, look, we're always trying to improve. Umpires are human beings, they make mistakes, but obviously in every walk of life and in every area we're trying to improve, So umpires are doing the same. And, I think maybe the no ball situation, if there could be a sort of video camera on the no ball, which would allow them a greater time on focusing on dismissals. I think, it's a tough job having to look at no balls and look at dismissals. So I think there's ways of doing it, but I just think the DRS, I think that can be looked at, because I think there's some sort of, LBW decisions where batsmen have run down the wicket and been hit on the pad and still been given up LBW, and you think, that's just not cricket. That's not part of the game. There's too much indecision there. We're going to get to the point where we start putting a chip in the ball, and it acts as like a homing device to tell whether it's going to hit the stumps. And where do you draw the line? I think there is a benefit of the doubt. It sort of, that's part of the game. But who am I to say that the game has moved a long way? I think it's gone a huge way in the last 15 years. So it's not one for me to say as it's become so commercial. I think 2020 cricket has just completely taken over. So I don't think anyone wants to listen to my sort of boring traditionalist kind of comments.
I'm going to go off the cricket questions now. If you could meet anyone, living or dead, who would you like to meet? My
word, that's some question, isn't it? I'd like to spend more time with my grandfather. I know it sounds a little bit cliched, but I was 13 when he died, and I often look back and think there's so much I would have liked to have spoken to him about. I would have liked to spend definitely more time in the pub with him as he regales more and more stories, because I think he was very good at that. So I would have definitely had a few more laughs and definitely had given him an opportunity to watch me play, and that would have been great. So he's definitely someone that I wish had remained alive for a lot longer. Other people, without sounding cliched, I suppose, you look at people like Muhammad Ali, such an inspiration. I guess having spent, I would have loved the opportunity to maybe spend some time in the gym with him, because I think if he didn't motivate you, nothing would. So there's loads of people. It would be hard and remiss of me to sort of leave people out, but I think those two sort of come to mind.
Dennis Compton and Muhammad Ali together down the pub would be quite a good evening, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I don't know how that would end up. I'm not sure how much Muhammad Ali used to drink, but that'd be interesting.
If you won the lottery, what would be the first thing you'd do with the money?
Gee whiz, I would probably buy my parents a really good house, and secure my sister's situation back in South Africa, and then I'd probably buy myself a really nice house too, to be honest with you, just outside of London near a golf course, and have definitely a golf membership at a really prestigious course. I think those are two areas. I think you can't go much further than that, to be honest with you. Having a nice home and family close by, I think, is always important.
Who would play you if they made a movie about your life?
Oh dear. Who would play me? Brad Pitt.
Are they? I'm sure he's free.
Yeah, I'm sure he's available.
What's your first memory of being really excited?
I remember getting my first pair of Nikes, and I stuck paper on the bottom of them because I didn't want them to get dirty. And I was so excited about these Nike pair of shoes. And that was probably my first real excitement. So that's funny how that comes to mind. But I'm sure there are others. But yeah, I think, I remember scrubbing the bottom of them when I came back out. I just didn't want them to get messed up.
What's the first thing you bought with your own money?
What was the first thing I bought with my own money? I think I bought a little Seat Ibiza, which was a little car back then when I got my first contract to run around in.
What's the last time you can remember being really nervous?
I think probably playing really nervous. I think probably playing against Sri Lanka when I knew I was really out of form. I think it wasn't a great time because I knew that I was fighting for my place, and yeah, I was pretty nervous then. But I guess that sort of nerves turned into kind of trying to be more laissez-faire about things and just say, you know, what will be will be. That sometimes can get you out of it. But I think I was quite nervous going into that series because I knew I wasn't in a good frame of mind and that I needed to kind of play okay to make sure that I played the next series. So never a good position to be in, but nerves come and go, I think, you know, and they tend to come when you don't want them, but you just got to learn how to manage them, and that's always the tough part of being a top professional.
What's the top item on your bucket list?
Ooh, top item of this. Do you know, I have to come back to that. I'm just trying. My bucket list is I've got a very long one. I think it'll have something to do with travel. It'll have something to do with travel and going somewhere really good. But I mean, there's a lot of things I would like to do. Probably go and explore America. Yeah, bucket list would to probably explore America, drive across the width of America. And just do a lot of photography. I think, you know, go with meet up with some good friends, play some of the great golf courses in the States. They literally do a road trip through the States and go to some really quirky areas, get some great photos. I think that for me would tick a huge box. You know, golf, photography and travel. I think that's pretty good.
Are you a morning or a night person?
A night person.
What celebrity annoys you the most?
Let me have a look. I'm just trying to think now. God, you've got me on the spot here.
Maybe nobody does.
No, I think there's quite a few of them, to be honest. But I think that's why I'm struggling. I'll try and think of that one as too. I'm just sort of going to sit with that.
The people who've done this before have tended to pick on reality TV people.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't watch enough of it, so it's kind of.
No, I don't either.
Kind of avoid reality TV like the plague. I think someone like Jordan's pretty annoying, isn't she? I mean, you know, just pretty crass and lacking intelligence. I think it always makes viewing really hard to come by. Each their own. I suppose I try and stay away from reality TV, but that's probably one of the reasons why.
On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the Fonz, how cool are you?
I would say I'm about a 7.
If your plane was about to crash, who would you want sitting next to you?
I'd probably want my mother sitting next to me. Yeah, I think my mother would give me I don't know, she's always been by my side, and I think having been away from them for quite some time, it would be nice to spend those last minutes with her.
If you had access to a time machine, where and when would you go?
I'd probably go back to the 80s. I'd love to have played cricket in the 80s when the West Indies were at their full strength and cricket was probably at its purest. So I think in many ways that would be the time that I'd like to go back to.
You fancy taking on the West Indian quartet of fast bowlers, do you?
I would have loved that. I know it sounds pretty daft, but I think that would have been a challenge like no other. And I think, that's where you could really have sort of stuck your hand out and showed a lot of courage.
How do you like your steak cooked?
Medium rare.
If you could live anywhere in the world, where would you go?
LA, Cape Town, Los Angeles or Cape Town.
If you could change anything about yourself, what would it be?
I think it probably would have been to be more decisive. I think there's times where I can be indecisive. I think if I could be a bit more decisive, then I really feel that would have made a big difference. I think I think being in sport and stuff can make things quite difficult at times, particularly considering the rest of life. So I think being decisive would have will make a big difference. And probably being able to play a bit more of a political game at times. I think I've just been quite a raw cricketer who genuinely wanted to just, to contribute, to do well and be a part of a team. But I think at times I've probably not really read the race well enough and handled myself as well as I could have. And
finally, Nick, what will you be doing in 10 years' time?
What will I be doing? Look, I'd like to be involved in various things. I'd still like to keep a hand in the game, particularly whether as a director of cricket or whether it was really trying to mentor young players. I think there's definitely an area that I really enjoy. I think it's trying to be real and that a lot of young players understand what it really takes and some of the difficulties that one goes through. I think that would be an area I'd like to do. I think, being involved in business, having different strings to my bow, doing a bit of TV work, a bit of travel, a bit of photography, and those kind of things. I think if I can be involved in things that both whet my creative appetite and also the financial one, then, I think I'll be doing okay.
It sounds like quite a nice life.
Sounds like a great life, but that's kind of the aim, but it doesn't always work out that way. So I think I'll just be lucky to hopefully move on from cricket. I think transitioning from cricket's never easy, or from sport. So being able to do that and really get my head into something else and have another purpose and real value and responsibility, I think's the aim.
Nick Compton, thank you.
Thanks, mate. Really enjoyed that.
It's that Badger style.
There we go, another edition of the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast at an end. Thank you very much to Nick Compton. Thank you very much to Kevin Sharp for their contributions this week. Much appreciated. We'll be back again, same time next week, with another edition of the Cricket Badger Radio Show podcast.
It's that Badger style.